I believe the wars that the U.S. has been involved in have been created by European nobility through secret orders who have been historically embedded in the U.S. military, occultists. I found several commonalities of these people in my research. They descended from British aristocrats. They were direct descendants of men who supposedly fought in the Revolutionary War as generals and officers, and then subsequently the Civil War and so on. And the ones that I researched all attended West Point Military Academy in New York. I went over this in some examples in my video titled West Point. In my research, I found this article from an official website of the U.S. government, army.mil, and it's titled The Supernatural Side of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. And this article is about the ghosts or demons that reside at West Point. The article mentioned a book called Shades of Gray that was written about this history, so I decided to read it. And I'm going to review the book in this video. And as I'm reviewing it, please keep in mind that the author was a psychologist at West Point. First, I will review the author, Timothy O'Neill, who lived from 1943 to 2023. He was a U.S. Army officer, professor, psychologist at West Point, a camouflage expert who invented digital camouflage. In 1979, he published a book titled The Individuated Hobbit, Young Tolkien and the Archetypes of Middle-earth. And that book is a study of J.R.R. Tolkien. He also published Shades of Gray, which is about a West Point psychologist investigating mysterious happenings on campus involving demons. And he also published Mandala, about a mysterious structure in Montana that has psychological and mystic properties. He was educated at the Citadel Military Academy. He received his bachelor's in political science from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. After joining the Army, he attended the University of Virginia and got his Ph.D. in experimental psychology with a concentration in biophysics. Biophysics includes biochemistry, molecular biology, physical chemistry, physiology, nanotechnology, bioengineering, computational biology, biomechanics, and developmental biology, and systems biology. He served in the U.S. Army for 25 years from 1966 with a doctorate in camouflage, and he was featured in the 2015 Australian documentary film Deception by Design. He worked as a consultant for the U.S. Army, Navy, and Marine Corps, and the FBI, and the Armed Forces of Afghanistan, Canada, New Zealand, and Qatar. He reached the rank of lieutenant colonel. In 1976, he became an instructor at West Point Military Academy, where he founded and was the first director of the program in engineering psychology. Engineering psychologists use psychological science, including developmental, cognitive, and abnormal psychology, to improve the relationship between people and machines. The field is applied in aviation, military command and control centers, and other systems and technology people use every day. Wonder what that could be. His book, Shades of Gray, is about a psychologist at West Point, featuring no doubt himself as the main character, and it is an occult book, like his other two. Shades of Gray is a concept in the occult. When researching for this book, I found many others with the same title. Students in most colleges these days are taught that it's important or impossible to know truth, but Jesus prays in John 17:17, "Sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth." Jesus is the living word. The Bible is the written word. God's word is truth. God does not see things as shades of gray. He sees in black and white. God is pure truth, pure white. The devil is pure black and has no truth in him. Gray is the essence of evil. We know to avoid what is clearly black, but we can be tempted and trapped by gray. Now I'll review the book. Shades of Gray was published in 1897 by Viking Publishers. Timothy O'Neill dedicated it to Mary Ellen, a Grail scholar. And if you watch the videos on this channel or listen to Gary Wayne and read his books, you have an understanding already of what the Grail refers to in the occult. It has many meanings, but in reference to the ancient Grail bloodlines, it's a dynastic line of King Arthur, later grafted into the Merovingian dynasty, so it is connected to the Rex Deuce bloodlines of Grail kingship. In the prologue, there is a poem titled Sam Hain. It reads, "Sing a song for the mistress of bones, the player on black keys, the darker harmonies." So the summary of the book reads, The dreams would start with the high-pitched sound of a child crying, and with what would come the cold frosting of windows of the old barracks room in the 47th Division at West Point. Cadet Barstow would wake then, and the gray shape would be there, the lights of its eyes shining on them with infinite sadness. Barstow thought that he was going crazy. One morning, visited again by the dream and its spectral attendants, he disappeared. When faculty psychologists Sam Bondurant and Liam Fitzdonnell are consulted in the Barstow case, their job is to keep the episode quiet and find some reasonable explanation for whatever is really going on in that room. Sam and Liam are friends who rarely see eye to eye, but together they're fit for the task. Sam with his rationalism and faith in sophisticated equipment, Liam with his own painful grasp of the demons to which the mind is vulnerable. Their investigation is joined by Sam's scholarly wife, Maggie, who gradually uncovers evidence of not one ghost, but several, bound together in the warp of time to a fatal fire in 1830 that occurred at West Point. What none of the protagonists realize is that the awesome power of the supernatural, the power to clutch at the living from the other side of death. Shades of Grey offers the reader a portrait of West Point and the people who spend their lives there. A resonant psychological theme. Timothy O'Neill's novel makes the power of the supernatural real and terrifying. And that's the end of the summary. So first I'm going to cover the main characters in the book. Most of them are Irish, so there is a Celtic Druidic theme here. There's also mention that Irish people are more prone to schizophrenia than any other ethnic group. Bear in mind that these people are psychologists at West Point. So the first character is the Grey Shade, and this spirit is referred to as the ghost of the 47th Division, and that is Captain Adonijah Proctor, who is a historical character in real life whose family died at West Point, including his daughter Annabelle. This ghost of the 47th Division appears as a gray form, a shade of gray. And in real life, he is the son of an old Massachusetts family, born in 1780 at Braintree and educated at Harvard. The next character is Annabelle, a spirit, the 7-year-old daughter of Captain Proctor who died in the fire in 1830 at West Point, who speaks in Gaelic, and when she possesses the cadets, they speak like her. The next character is Sam Bondurant, and it seems that Sam's character in the story is Timothy O'Neill, the author, who his own wife refers to as a Philistine. He's a psychologist at West Point. His character is very arrogant. In the book, the character of Sam's job at West Point was concerned with, quote, technical problems of wedding men to machines. The way that he and the other supposed psychologists refer to cadets in the book is disturbing, and all the main characters in the book have a very arrogant attitude, referring to non-West Point staff in the surrounding areas as peasants. Sam's bookshelf at West Point is described as perverse texts on disorders of sexual behavior and child development. His wife said they made him look like a pedo, so she had to move them from their house to his office. And he also describes his own self as a pervert in the book. He also had on that shelf a plastic replica of the Australopithecus skull, which looks like an ape, but in real life, archaeologists say is the first human, and in real life was named Lucy. Sam also has a human brain in a jar on his shelf in his office. The next character is Liam, and the character Liam might be describing Sam's alter ego in this book. Liam is also a psychologist, and Liam is described as a neo-Shoshone medicine man, and Shoshones were Native American snake Indians. Liam reveals in the book that he was a Freemason. He uses runes and mentions that his favorite god is Dagda. Track is the other psychologist described as a psychopath and a pagan who worships in the high places, and in the book it's jokingly stated that he stands in the middle of a ring of stones and howls incantations from the Necronomicon. So all of those above characters were in wars together in psychologists at West Point. Liam's favorite object in the book is described as a carved cherry desk from China with dark intertwined dragons and a matching chair, known in his own family as the Baron's seat, named after the stone seat where the high kings were once crowned in Ulster, which had belonged to his grandfather Roderick Fixdonnell. In the top drawer he keeps rune stones that he found in a creek on expeditions near Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which he casts these runes in the book to talk to demons. The first interpretation of the runes reads, quote, I seek for the self, yet I am the warrior, full of impetuosity, yet obedient to others. He warriors, ancient tension, and between those forces there is a standstill, my soul hanging here from the life tree like Odin, twisting slowly in the wind. The next character is Maggie. Maggie is Sam's younger wife in the book, who he likes to say he married her only because she has a nice chest area. Maggie is a writer who wrote short stories, which were also polytheist type stories. One of those was Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Sam and Maggie get drunk one night in the story, and when walking home on campus, they seem to encounter a spirit, and then they have relations outside in, quote, pagan abandon, and Sam describes Maggie during that encounter as a fairy. Later in the story, she becomes pregnant, and it's suggested that this is when it happened. The next character is Barstow, a cadet at the beginning of the story who experiences the spirit and disappears from West Point. The next cadet that experiences the spirit is Tetzel, and he shares that experience with the psychologist and allows them to hypnotize him and then becomes subsequently possessed by the spirits during that hypnotism. The next character is General Upton, and that's a historical character who in real life was a U.S. Army general and military strategist who attended West Point in the 1800s, who throughout the book it is believed that he wrote a book in 1876 called West Point on the Hudson about the ghost of the 47th Division. He is also from an aristocratic family involved in both the Revolutionary and the Civil War in real life. And it's through this book that Maggie and the psychologist learn about the identity of the ghost of the 47th Division. In the preface of that book, it is written, "I am especially indebted to my friend General Winfield Scott, on whose staff I served in the late war, for helping and compiling my observations on the celebrated specter of Captain Adonijah Proctor, who is the Gray Shade. Winfield Scott is another murdering general who a lake here in Georgia is named for. It's near Blood Mountain, and he graduated West Point in 1844. The next character is Colonel Sylvanus Thayer, and this is also a historical character in real life, father of West Point Military Academy and superintendent of West Point in 1830 when the fire took place. And like so many of the other people that I've been covering lately, he had an aristocratic family that immigrated from England. In 1815, Thayer was sent by the U.S. government to Europe to examine the French fortifications and to study more thoroughly the science of war as practiced in the army of Napoleon. And then he incorporated those teachings at West Point. And those practices and teachings are described in the article that I linked yesterday from the government site about how West Point is teaching world domination. There are occult references throughout this book, which seem to be intentionally included references, which I will go over now. Number one is Tolkien, which is not surprising, since Timothy O'Neill had written another book on Tolkien. There are Disney references also. Looking Glass. Through the Looking Glass is described as a state with the cadet that he experiences when he experiences the demon. Through the Looking Glass is an occult concept, like in Alice in Wonderland. A looking glass is a mirror and used to summon spirits in the occult. H.P. Lovecraft. This is one of Maggie's favorite books, and Lovecraft was a New England occult author who wrote about demons. Elfland. Maggie makes a reference to finding the road to Elfland while searching out the mysteries of the ghost, and she quotes a title called Thomas the Rhymer and the Queen of Elfland, or the Queen of Fairies. And Elfland was also in the poem of Sidney Lanier, the other Confederate general that I covered, also a druid and occultist. The next reference is Pan. Tetzel, the cadet, when he goes into a trance, appears to be listening to the pipes of Pan, or the flutes. The next concept is the spirit of the court. A paper written in 1947 about spirits, written by an older lady, Bernice Court, who lives on Storm King Mountain, which is an actual place near West Point, in a place with, quote, an exquisite view, huge rooms, and fireplaces that you could sacrifice to Moloch in. Her dog's name is Satan. So why would the author put something like that in that book? And her husband was Captain Gort, a historical character in real life, and her house was also haunted. The next reference is Cuchulainn, an Irish pagan god who was written about in a book in the library who Liam reads and learns Gaelic that way, since that Gaelic version was the only version available. Belladonna and Nightshade are used to describe Liam's lover's kiss, who is later referred to as the Bride of Dracula. Another occult concept is the Knights Templar. Maggie makes Sam a costume that is a Templar Knight, who they say in the book that traditions identify the Knights of the Temple with the guardianship of the Holy Grail. And Maggie dresses in a medieval gown that she makes, and they go to a Halloween ball or a costume party on Halloween night. The next reference is Grimm's Fairy Tales. Liam talks about the darker themes in myth and folklore to address the early fear of children, and references Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, and Hansel and Gretel, which he states are essays in the craft. And then he creepily tells some of the stories to a child of a friend they are visiting. Dracula is a concept. Liam's girlfriend Anna dresses as the Bride of Dracula for the Halloween costume party, and Maggie describes her as an incubus. I remember Gary Wayne saying that occultists, when they dress for Halloween, they channel the spirits of the characters they dress as. The Black-Eyed Club. At one point, the story of Maggie gives Sam a black eye. Points of light are all around the room when the spirit appears after being summoned. Old Man in the Tree. Liam meets with the Old Man in the Tree in his pagan fantasies. So the plot really just involves the investigation of the spirits being experienced by some of the cadets, and then eventually by the psychologists. The spirits scare away the first cadet at the beginning, but it's also experienced by other cadets, Tetzel, in the barracks. Sam and Liam then hypnotize Tetzel the cadet, and they record it. And the part that struck me is when Liam describes that hypnotism, he describes it as a trance state accompanied by breathing exercises. He also describes to the cadet that he is going to have his consciousness split, and that he will be disassociated and physically detached. And that is a concept that he describes that he had been teaching to his class of cadets at the academy. So they get into the hypnotism, and the cadet describes seeing the spirit and describes him as having eyes like stars or the lights of heaven. And during this encounter in the recording, the cadet becomes possessed by the spirit. They hypnotize him again to observe him, channeling that spirit. Then they end up setting up paranormal activity machines with electrical impulses and sensors that's created by Sam as an experiment to observe and record the phenomenon in the barracks in the cadets' room where the spirit has been appearing. And it causes these cadets to start having seizures The psychologists eventually also experience the spirits, and in the midst of all this, they all start having weird nightmares. Liam describes that spirit as a transparent figure standing over the bed, pale, luminous, wearing a long cloak with a shoulder cape like those worn in the Mexican War. Eventually, they remove the cadets from the room so that the psychologists can set themselves up in there for observations, which they do the day after Halloween, which is Samhain. On Samhain, Liam ends up walking through the wall in the haunted room and gets possessed by the spirit of the Gray Shade, and then comes back out injured with burns on his hands from the fire of 1830. And then later, they find out that the book that they all thought had been written by Upton was actually written by Edgar Allan Poe, who also attended West Point. Thanks for listening.